The anime begins with showing a giant flying fortress suddenly appears in the sky. The appearance of flying fortresses is signals of a relentless war for the past 13 years between humanity and the monsters who seek to dominate the earth. Fortunately, humanity has the 5 heroes that known as the Dragon Keeper, defenders of truth who always protect humans from the monsters' attacks. The 5 members of Dragon Keeper have different colors, starting from the Red Keeper, Blue Keeper, Green Keeper, Yellow Keeper, and finally, the Pink Keeper. 13 years have passed since the giant flying fortress appeared in the sky, and now a grand weekly event is being shown, attended by many spectators. It turns out, the grand event is held to celebrate the weekly battle between the Dragon Keepers and the monsters. Because of the grandeur of the event, the commentator even gives analysis and predictions from experts on how this battle will unfold. Shortly after, Keeper as the leader of the 5 Rangers appears. At that time, the Red Keeper is seen giving autographs to fans who adore him, from teenagers to children, and even adults. Switching to another place, a man named D is shown being warned by 2 Ranger soldiers. The 2 Ranger soldiers are Yumeko Suzukiri and Hibiki Sakurama. They both seem to warn D because soon their area will become a battlefield, so as guardians, they want to ensure the safety of civilians. Upon hearing this, D appears grumpy because he believes that there have been no civilian casualties for the past few years. However, Suzukiri informs D that it is just a protocol they must adhere to. Seeing the 2 guards very skilled, D praises them, and unexpectedly, they both invite D to join the Ranger force. Upon hearing this, D seems hesitant, but Suzukiri suddenly holds D's hand and tries to convince him. Because of Suzukiri's intense gaze, D finally appears to accept the offer and D is directed to a staircase. After climbing the stairs, D appears very amazed upon seeing the breathtaking view of Amanagawa City, District 1, where above the city, there is also a giant flying fortress along with its bridge. Shortly after, in the middle of the arena, the hordes of monster factions, or they are also often referred to as Dusters, finally appear. Not only the Dusters, but also the leader of the attack, a monster named Ultora Tiger, appears in the arena. However, the audience there was not afraid. Instead, they taunted the monsters while throwing bottles and cans at them as if they were losers. Not long after, the 5 Dragon Keepers finally appeared and posed like Rangers typically do. Seeing the Rangers' arrival, the monster boss ordered the Dusters to attack the civilian spectators to instill terror. However, the attack seemed to be intercepted by other Ranger forces, one of them being Suzukiri, who managed to fend off an attack from one of the Dusters, while Sakurama escorted civilians to a safer place. However, the Dusters suddenly emerged, and at that moment, the Dragon Keepers seemed overwhelmed fighting the monster. The tense situation clearly panicked the audience, eventually rallying their support, which reinvigorated the Rangers. However, it was different for the Dusters. Knowing the Rangers would soon attack them with a combined assault using sacred artifacts, the Dusters decided to gather. Meanwhile, another surprising fact emerged, because the monsters already knew that they would be defeated. Which means that the fierce battle between the Rangers and the monsters was just a trap that only the Dusters and a few other people knew about. After that, the Dusters deliberately gathered at this time so they could be defeated by the Rangers' combined attack. Shortly after, one of the Dusters stated that they only needed to revive within the fortress after being defeated by the Rangers, implying that the Dusters were semi-immortal beings. And now, the monsters seemed confused about what dialogue to have after they were defeated. At that moment, one of the Dusters named Fighter D suggested a cliché dialogue commonly said by monsters after being defeated. However, the idea was rejected by the other Dusters as too cheesy. After realizing that Fighter D was there, the Dusters were quite surprised because he weren't supposed to be on duty at that moment. But at that moment, the Rangers were ready to unleash their combined attack, and finally, Fighter D, who was fed up with all the theatrics, suddenly left formation and slowly approached the Rangers. Even though at that moment his other comrades advised Fighter D to stop, he ignored them. The scene then showed an incident from 1 hour earlier, where the Dusters were confused about which monster role they would portray this week. In fact, out of frustration, one of the Dusters named Fighter A chose to sleep rather than think of a plan. However, the radio suddenly sounded, which turned out to be the voice of the previous commentator. Initially, the Dusters really wanted to get a clue or plan predicted by experts to use in this week's show. At that moment, the experts predicted they would unleash secret weapons. Unfortunately, the Dusters didn't have any secret weapons at all. Eventually, a rather serious conversation took place among the Dusters, and from that conversation, several important mysteries were revealed. Where the monsters had actually been defeated exactly a year after they arrived on Earth, and their bosses had also been defeated by the Rangers. However, instead of being eliminated, these Dusters were enslaved by the Rangers to be actors. So every week, the Dusters could entertain the audience with fake battles that had been happening for the past 12 years, and the Rangers would make a huge profits from the show. The Dusters were also assigned to prepare the battle plan every week. At that moment, there is only an hour left before the event is set to begin. But because they haven't yet found a suitable monster role, Fighter G finally designs a rather fierce monster. However, the idea is rejected by Fighter A because he believes such an abstract monster concept wouldn't leave a good impression on the audience, as a monster should have a strong motif. Suddenly, a female Duster named Fighter L suggests a cat-like monster as her design. However, the idea is firmly rejected by Fighter G because he believes the monster they create should look cruel. After that, Fighter G suggests they portray a tiger monster, and finally, the idea is approved by the other Dusters. On the other hand, Fighter D became very upset upon seeing his friends accepting their life now. Eventually, Fighter D encourages his friends not to give up and to defeat the Dragon Keepers someday, then conquer the world. However, instead of appreciation, the other Dusters laugh at Fighter D. Eventually, because he is so upset, Fighter D suddenly goes berserk and beats up his other comrades. Not long after, Fighter D is seen battered after being beaten up by his own comrades. And now, Fighter D is approached by one of his friends, Fighter F. At that moment, Fighter F explains that since their boss was defeated, the Dusters have been forced to stage attack theatrics every week, which must be kept secret from the general public. And according to him, it's a ceasefire condition they had agreed to beforehand. Therefore, Fighter F asks D not to fight with his other comrades because they are all satisfied with what they have achieved so far. He also warns D to accept this, even though it's very embarrassing for a monster. Shortly after, the other Dusters eventually regroup, where one of the Dusters agrees to portray the tiger monster, and they are shown a copy of the animal encyclopedia to portray their role maximally. However, after seeing one of their comrades transformed into a fake monster boss, Fighter D tells his friend that he's going on vacation. Not only that, Fighter D never wants to play the role of a boss if he's only going to be used as a punching bag by the Rangers. So, this is why the other fighters were quite surprised when they found out that Fighter D also joined the fight. Because at this weekly event D was supposed to be off duty after he was causing a disturbance. However, at that moment, Fighter F suddenly tells D about his experience last week, when a child gave him encouragement. Therefore, Fighter D will strive for the people who know nothing and make the Sentai become stars so that the audience becomes more enthusiastic, even though he thinks it's very embarrassing for monsters. After that, the scene returns to the arena, where the monsters have been defeated, and now only Fighter D is standing in front of the Rangers. Upon seeing this, the Rangers are quite surprised because their plan is slightly different from what was planned. At that moment, Ranger Pink warns D to return to the fortress while D still has time. However, D, who is already upset, seems to reject the offer and chooses to fight. However, his enthusiasm to keep fighting was very different from the strength he possessed. After that, Red as the leader will step forward to solve the problem. At the same time, D was quite surprised after seeing a child cheering him on. Because D believes that humans just want to see the Dusters struggle before they are eventually defeated. Shortly after, in the battle, D was defeated easily with just one blow. But he didn't immediately go to the fortress to regroup with his comrades. Instead, D transformed himself right on top of a building. At that moment, D's anger was also evident, as he didn't want to continue being a slave forever. However, during his transformation into a human, suddenly Suzukiri appears and meets him. At that moment, it is revealed that the figure D was a Dusters who was Fighter D himself in disguise. Fortunately, at that moment, D managed to fully transform before his disguise was discovered by Suzukiri. At that moment, D also claims to be there because he wanted to watch the battle from a higher place. After that, with a sharp gaze, Suzukiri questions D's plan to join the Ranger recruitment. With determination, D agrees, and in his heart, he promises to defeat the Rangers someday. The scene then telling about the immortal bodies of the monsters attacking humans ruthlessly until the humans managed to destroy the monsters using sacred artifacts, a weapon that created 1 year after the war began. It can conclude that the sacred artifacts are a crucial factor in humanity's success in defeating the monsters. After that, the scene shows the Ranger recruits who are currently undergoing training. At that moment, D was seen participating in the training, and seeing his seniors there, D is very upset because he believes Rangers like them are unaware of the theatrics happening. However, at the moment, it seems D is unaware of the identities of his seniors. At that moment, D thinks to himself that his goal in joining the Ranger force is to infiltrate the enemy base and defeat the Rangers. Not long after, D is seen searching for the whereabouts of the Dragon Keepers inside the base. However, they weren't there, and he ended up meeting Sakurama, who seemed happy to see D come to the recruitment test. The same goes for Suzukiri, who also approaches him. When Sakurama presses his cheek against D's, it appears that his cheek cracks, and this could happen because a fighter has a fragile body, a fact that Suzukiri also seems to be aware of. However, at that moment, Suzukiri invites D to have lunch together instead. Upon hearing this, D considers his two companions to be foolish because they cannot realize his disguise. After that, the scene returns to show the Dusters currently playing inside the base. However, one of them looks panicked after Red Keeper and Blue Keeper suddenly arrive at their base using a helicopter. Apparently, the purpose of their visit was to look for a Duster who dared to betray them. However, at that moment, Fighter A informs them that until now Fighter D has not yet returned since the battle happened. Upon hearing this, Blue appears very angry, so he punishes Fighter A. But Red Keeper opposes Blue's decision because he believes the Dusters also feel the same sadness from being betrayed. Therefore, he believes only Fighter D cannot follow their agreement. After hearing Red's explanation, Blue seemed to agree and he apologized to the Dusters and asked them to report to them when D had returned so that similar incidents would not happen again. After that, they assigned two third-level from Blue's squadron named Eren Hikaru and Sintaruri to guard the floating fortress. Upon hearing this, Fighter C appeared to oppose the decision because the Dusters also have the right to their privacy. Eventually, Blue, infuriated, battered Fighter C until he was destroyed. After that, Blue also threatened to annihilate them all if they kept babbling. At that moment, Fighter A prostrated to plead for forgiveness and promised that they would not resist. Upon seeing this, Red Keeper appeared very pleased because he believed that the decision they made was a step towards world peace. However, Red also promised to ruthlessly eliminate the traitors, just like he did when he defeated the other monster bosses. On the other hand, D was seen devouring steaks in an unusual way. Afterward, Suzukiri informs D that the reason the Dragon Keepers are not in the base is that they are stationed at their respective garrison bases scattered across several points in the city of Amanagawa. At that moment, Sakurama also tells D about the Rangers' duties, which not only to eradicate monsters but also to participate in social tasks such as solving cases with the police or participating in local cleanup activities. However, during their conversation, D accidentally tells them both that the battles between monsters and Dragon Keepers have been nothing but a play all along. Realizing that D has said something that shouldn't be talked about, D tries to clarify his statement, but fortunately, Suzukiri seems to misunderstand D's meaning because she also saw the video. Suzukiri then explains that there has been a recent video claiming that everything that has happened is just a scheme by the Rangers. The same goes for Sakurama, who is quite upset about the video. Upon seeing their reactions, he was sure that his two colleagues were completely innocent and didn't know what happened. Not long after, a boy and his mother appear, who turns out to be civilians who were helped at the previous weekly event by Suzukiri and Sakurama. Apparently the boy had come to ask to take a photo with them. Upon seeing the ranger team surrounded by people, D feels that his food will surely taste better if many people praise it. D also feels sad knowing that the Dusters never even eat delicious food like what D is eating right now. After lunch, Suzukiri and Sakurama leave D to start their afternoon tasks. However, as they leave, accidentally, D overhears that Suzukiri is about to go to the Red Garrison to deliver a letter. And she invites Sakurama to accompany her because she knows Sakurama is a fan of Red Keeper. At the same time, D asks the boy to show him the result of their photo before. And with his ability, D transforms himself into Sakurama to infiltrate. Meanwhile, at the Red Garrison headquarters, Suzukiri was seen walking inside the headquarters together with D, who was disguised as Sakurama, where Suzukiri didn't expect Sakurama to accept her invitation. Apparently, D's goal this time is to eliminate Red Keeper using the knife hidden in his small bag when he gets the chance later. At that moment, D even asked Suzukiri to allow him to deliver the letter to Red Keeper, and without suspicion, Suzukiri granted it. However, when they began to enter the main base, D encountered many other Red Ranger troops. And the problem was that D did not know the real face of Red Keeper because D always met Red Keeper in battles using a mask. Until finally, One of them confessed that he was the real Red Keeper. Feeling that the opportunity was right in front of him, D finally wanted to carry out his mission. Suddenly, Suzukiri informed that the man in front of them was a third-ranked senior in the Red Squad named Sun Takeda. But at that moment, Shun felt quite strange about Sakurama's behavior, that very different, unlike his usual self. Shun then grabbed Sakurama's hand very hard while asking Sakurama to call him by his usual nickname. Fortunately, Suzukiri intervened once again and asked Shun not to bully his junior. After that, Suzukiri finally gave the letter to Shun because she believed that Shun would become a Red Keeper someday. Feeling happy to receive such praise, Shun finally accepted the letter, and he hurried away. When he was about to leave, Shun suddenly invited Suzukiri to join the Red Ranger Squad because he believed the Yellow Squadron only focused on research, while the Red Ranger Squad specialized in eradicating monsters. However, Suzukiri declined the invitation, preferring to work freely as a researcher. Eventually, as they walked out of the Red Garrison base, D felt quite annoyed because he had failed to execute his plan. At that moment, D accidentally saw a recruitment poster inside the base, where he finally learned the identity of the real Red Keeper from the text he read. At the same time, the figure of the man in the poster suddenly appeared, and D realized that the man was the real Red Keeper. And the identity of a ranger was finally revealed as Sosi Akabane. Seeing the Red Keeper figure in front of him, D looked quite shocked until he fell silent. However, before D could execute his plan, suddenly Suzukiri asked him to leave and asked her colleague not to be too enthusiastic even though Red Keeper was his idol. When they were outside, another surprise occurred because Suzukiri suddenly asked D to immediately hand over the knife he was hiding, and without realizing it, D handed over the knife. It turns out Suzukiri had known about D's disguise from the beginning, but she pretended not to know, even admitting that she had covered D's ignorance for a full day. However, Suzukiri praised D for remaining calm while there because if he had attacked Red inside the base, Red would have surely turned the tables. Knowing his disguise was exposed, D finally put up a fight, and after losing several times, D finally calmed down, then asked Suzukiri to chat, where Suzukiri proposed to D to work together, and as payment, she would inform him how to defeat the Dragon Keepers. Shortly after that, the real Sakurama finally appeared, where he informed Suzukiri that there was currently a monster appearing not far from their location. After hearing that, D seemed puzzled because he thought today wasn't Sunday. Eventually, D just left, and it turned out the monster mentioned by Sakurama was Fighter F. At that moment, Fighter F was being chased by the Red Ranger forces. It turns out, Fighter F's arrival was to find his friend D because until now his friend hadn't returned. Because he couldn't find D anywhere, F planned to return to the base. Suddenly, Red Keeper finally appeared, where D looked very surprised to see his friend in danger. However, D felt he couldn't do anything, especially now that Red Keeper had already drawn his holy artifact weapon, and as a result of his actions, F was punished for being considered a traitor. Although defeated, F felt happy because he felt he had fought as a monster for 13 meaningless years. The scene then shifts to 12 years ago, when the Dragon Guardians suddenly visit the monster base, after they defeated all the bosses. At that moment, Red Keeper gave two choices to the Dusters, which the first choice was to fight to the end, and the second choice was to work together between humans and monsters. In the present, after F was defeated, D finally chose to leave. However, as he left, Sakurama seemed to follow him, and Sakurama revealed that he already knew about D's true identity. After that, he expressed condolences for the loss of one of his companions. Sakurama also admitted to overhearing the conversation between D and Suzukiri earlier, so Sakurama asked D to just surrender because even though the war continued, justice would always prevail. Upon hearing that, D expressed his frustration at being forced to play a role for 12 years, and D promised to end the Ranger organization. Shortly after, Sakurama happily gave D a graduation letter, and he officially joined the Sentai. Finally, Sakurama's goal was revealed because it turned out he had aspirations to create a world where humans and monsters could live together. However, D disagreed and asked Sakurama not to speak to him again. Then, D disappeared by saying that Sakurama was not worthy of being a Sentai. Sometime later, D was seen meeting Suzukiri in a cafe, where he asked Suzukiri to tell him how to defeat the Dragon Keepers, and he promised to never contact her again. Upon hearing this, Suzukiri slashed D's neck, and she seemed to provide an understanding of D's current position, where she could threaten to reveal D's identity to the public. However, Suzukuri still believed in D and told him that the key to defeating the Dragon Keepers lay in the holy artifacts. According to her, there were 5 holy artifacts with different powers, and these artifacts also granted their users holy powers, so that the Rangers are finally able to eliminate these immortal monsters. Suzukuri also added that the Ranger organization is not perfect, relying only on its top 5 members, so Suzukuri wants to disrupt that balance. After hearing that, D understood that she wanted to do something to the holy artifacts, but he thought the Dragon Keepers would surely not let their guard down on their respective holy artifacts. Suzukuri agreed, but she said there was one moment where the Rangers had to leave their artifacts behind, namely during the weekly battle, because it is impossible for them to bring real artifacts into the fake battle. Eventually, the reason the Dusters could survive after being hit by the combined attacks from the Rangers at last week's event was revealed, where the weapons they used were not holy artifact weapons, and it was different from the incident with Fighter F earlier when Red attacked him with a genuine holy artifact weapon until F was completely eliminated. Sometime later, the weekly battle had finally arrived, and now D with Suzukuri were right near the entrance to the Red garrison base. At that moment, D was using his ability to try to become Red Keeper. However, in the midst of his efforts, Suzukuri asked D why Dusters didn't use the disguise ability when fighting. After hearing that, D answered that not all Dusters had the ability to mimic appearances well, and humbly admitted that he just happened to be good at mimicking Earth's inhabitants. However, according to Suzukuri, D's talent could change the course of the battle. Shortly after, D seemed to have successfully transformed into Red Keeper completely, and very cautiously entered the base. While using the communication device, Suzukuri informed him the location of the holy artifacts. During the journey, D, who was quite confused, finally asked why Suzukuri was helping monsters, even though she was actually one of the Ranger members. However, Suzukuri answered by likening it to a teenage drama, essentially admitting that she wouldn't support the main character who would definitely win. So she supported D as their rival to change the story's ending. After easily passing through the Red Ranger forces, D seemed very happy because he thought his disguise had succeeded. However, when he was about to reach the location of the artifact, D suddenly met Shun, who happened to be there. When they met, Shun had suspected D from the beginning, in contrast to D, who seemed very calm while talking to Shun. After successfully entering the weapon storage warehouse, D seemed very surprised after finding out that the holy artifact he was looking for was stored carelessly like a house decoration. After that, D realized that the Dragon Keepers didn't even consider the Dusters as a threat. However, when he had just obtained Red Keeper's holy artifact, suddenly Shun shot him in the head from behind. After that incident, D seemed very angry because Shun had boldly shot him in the head, because if it was the real Red, he would definitely die. After hearing that, Shun said that the real Red couldn't possibly be caught off guard like him. Shun then ruthlessly shot D multiple times. After satisfyingly shooting D continuously, Shun finally picked up the holy artifact that had fallen. However, upon seeing this, D asked Shun if the holy artifact could indeed be used by someone other than the Dragon Keeper. At that moment, Shun seemed unaware, so he wanted to use D as an experiment. However, Shun's gaze changed instantly when he saw D carrying a lot of dynamite, threatening to blow up the place with him. And out of fear, Shun chose to put the holy artifact weapon back on the floor, persuading D not to detonate the dynamite. However, D suddenly attacked and managed to defeat Shun. Shortly after, D was seen crawling through the air ducts to escape. When he succeeded in getting out, Red Keeper was already waiting there. Apparently, D's infiltration had been discovered by Red through a strange bird that D had encountered earlier. At that moment, Red Keeper asked D to immediately hand over the holy artifact and told D to leave immediately. However, D was fed up and chose to fight one-on-one with Red Keeper. During the fight, Red Keeper easily blocked D's attacks, even managing to knock down D's left arm and holy artifact weapon. But he didn't let the artifact fall into the abyss, where D jumped while trying to catch the artifact back into his hand. After seeing D successfully retrieve the holy artifact, Red smiled at him because he was touched by D's effort to prioritize the holy artifact over his left arm. However, when D asked Red Keeper to fight him seriously, Red suddenly laughed loudly. Red admitted that he hadn't been serious all this time and hadn't defeated D yet because no one was watching them at the moment. Not long after a helicopter from a broadcasting company finally appeared, Red said that now he would start being serious because tens of thousands of people were watching him on TV. waiting for D's defeat in a very gruesome manner. After that, Red resumed his acting as if he were still injured from last week's tiger monster attack. At that moment, Blue finally arrived and attacked D with his kick. Not only Blue, but also the other members of the Dragon Keepers finally appeared. During the tension, Pink Keeper finally realized that D was the fighter who had betrayed them last week. However, Red Keeper seemed unaware of this, because for him, all fighters looked the same, so Red Keeper doesn't need to remember it. After that, Red asked Blue to eliminate D with his holy artifact. Upon hearing this, D seemed very angry because he wanted to fight Red Keeper one-on-one. Pink then told her comrades that lately they had only been ending fights with regular fighters and making the show less interesting. Therefore, Green Keeper suddenly whispered something to Red about an interesting plan for the viewers. Apparently, the plan was to pretend to be amazed by D's courage and intend to keep D alive, where Red also guaranteed his safety. Upon hearing this, the audience was quite surprised by the Ranger's decision. After the request was rejected, Red finally asked Blue to eliminate D. At the same time, another surprising thing happened when Red was about to use his holy artifact. But the artifact suddenly disappeared. After realizing that the artifact in front of him was fake, Red realized that D had successfully swapped the real holy artifact with his left arm, which D had modified to resemble the artifact. This incident clearly made Red very angry, and now he questioned where his original artifact had gone. It turned out that the artifact was in Suzukiri's hands, so there were only 4 artifacts left that she could steal. The scene then shifts to the main headquarters of the Rangers, specifically in the Sacred Banquet Hall. At that moment, the 5 Rangers are seen gathered with their respective first-level juniors from each squadron. From the Blue Squadron, Blue Keeper is seen accompanied by his junior, Kamachi Aizome, while from the Green Squad, Green Keeper is accompanied by his junior, Kennen Hijui. In the Red Squadron, Red Keeper is accompanied by his junior, Himura Jean, and in the Pink Squadron, Pink Keeper is accompanied by her junior, Majoreo Nadeshiko. Finally, Yellow Keeper is seen alone because Suzukiri is not by his side. Not long after, Suzukiri finally appears. However, her appearance seems to infuriate Blue greatly, and he asks Yellow to properly teach his lover because, according to him, Suzukiri didn't even apologize for arriving late. Upon hearing this, Suzukiri turns the tables and immediately mocks him by saying that Blue is the one who actually treats his junior like a lover. Just like a junior high school kid who has just hit puberty. Upon hearing this, Blue clearly infuriates with the remark, but his junior suddenly heads Blue's head, causing him in pain. As the two were about to fight, suddenly a strange creature appears, stopping the fight. The creature was Draggy, the mascot of the Ranger team. After that, Red asks everyone to remain calm, and with a sharp gaze, Red asks Suzukiri what action she should take after making a mistake. Realizing that this is not an ordinary question, Suzukiri appears quite annoyed and apologizes to all the Rangers. After the situation calms down, Red suddenly reveals the essence of their meeting, where he wants to confess to his comrades that his holy artifact weapon has been stolen. Red also admits to his junior that he can no longer transform, and the costume he is currently wearing is the costume he usually uses for performances. Upon hearing this, the other Rangers are quite surprised while Pink Keeper questions where the fighter hid Red's holy artifact weapon. However, Suzukiri suddenly predicts that the fighter has already given the artifact to someone. At that moment, Red promises that he will strike the hammer of justice against anyone who has stolen his holy artifact weapon. After that, another surprising thing happens when Red's junior, named Himura Jean, suddenly asks him to take responsibility for his fatal mistake. As the holy artifact weapon is the foundation of the Sentai, so it is unreasonable for the artifact to be lost or stolen. Himura Jean also asks Red to step down from his position as a Dragon Keeper. After seeing this, Suzukiri appears quite fed up because she knows that it was Himura Jean who leaked information about Red's holy artifact weapon. Meanwhile, Red appears quite calm, and he also agrees with what his junior said. Although he believes there is no rule stating that the successor must be chosen based on rank, Red feels that he can hand over his position to Himura Jean. Suddenly, Red strikes Himura Jean against the wall with great force. After realizing that his junior is not stronger than him, Red refuses to give up his position and hits Himura Jean again. At the same time, Sakurama was listening to all the conversations of the Rangers inside the headquarters. Sometime later, Blue and one of his juniors named Hikaru are seen standing at the battleground between Red and D from earlier. At that moment, Blue informs that there are two worst-case scenarios if the thief manages to escape alive with Red's holy artifact. With the first possibility is that the thief will return to the floating fortress, and the second possibility is that the thief will be carried away by the wind. Therefore, Blue will try to search within the fortress, while Hekaru is tasked with estimating the direction of the wind and then tracking the location of the thief. Not long after, Blue was seen in a fight with D using the holy artifact. At that moment, Blue, who doesn't want to destroy Red's headquarters, chooses to control his power, so his attack isn't too strong. Strangely, the explosion that occurs by the attack is more devastating than he anticipated. Elsewhere, D appears to be severely injured, and there is also a hole in his abdomen that cannot be closed due to being hit by the holy artifact of Blue earlier. D is still alive from the attack thanks to the dynamite explosion given by Suzukiri. And as D begins to lose consciousness, Sakurama appears in front of him. Apparently, the extremely powerful explosion turns out to be the explosion from the dynamite given by Suzukiri, not from Blue's holy artifact weapon. Shortly after, Sakurama is seen successfully bringing D into a cave in the middle of the forest, but when regains consciousness, D suddenly attacks Sakurama. However, due to the wound in his abdomen, D feels pain, so he can't move properly. Upon seeing this, Sakurama finally gives first aid equipment to him. But due to his pride, D refuses the help and chooses to close the hole in his abdomen using his own power. After seeing D's ability up close, Sakurama is quite surprised and he considers that power to be a miracle. Blushing at the praise, D finally gives another performance to Sakurama. After talking for a while, Sakurama suddenly tells D about his past life story, where he once had a father who believed that all lives were equal and humans were not at the peak of life. As a child who loved his father, Sakurama considered his father to be everything to him. The same goes for his beliefs until one day a giant fortress appeared in the sky. At that time, Sakurama's father considered it to be a decree from the gods, and he also believed that their arrival was meant to justify the human way of thinking. However, unlike the obedient Sakurama, his older sister seemed unsure about their parents' words. The scene then shows Sakurama's close relationship with his older sister, where he suddenly said he would protect the people who were precious to him, the same words that Red Keeper uttered on television. Upon hearing this, his older sister was quite surprised because they were supposed to be forbidden from watching Dragon Keeper on television by their parents, considering it contained elements of violence. After learning that Sakurama really liked Dragon Keeper, his older sister asked if Sakurama considered their father's words a mistake. But Sakurama, who was still naive at the time, affirmed his parents' words. From his answer, it's clear that his older sister understands that Sakurama doesn't yet grasp the meaning of her question, as the ideologies of both sides are highly contradictory. The scene then shows Sakurama's father looking very angry after seeing the rangers that always using violent means when in conflict with monsters. Similarly, Sakurama's mother appeared the same way, until his parents' thoughts were directly accepted by Sakurama. One day, Sakurama's parents along with other sect followers are shown gathering in a building, where a monster resembling a deity appears from the sky. At the same time, from the staircase, his older sister is seen trying as hard as possible to prevent Sakurama from entering the room. Suddenly, a huge explosion occurs in front of them. After that, Sakurama finally sees his parents and other people brutally killed. And in front of him now, there is also a monster claiming to be a deity, which eventually attacks Sakurama and his older sister. As a result of the attack, his older sister is in pain, with both her legs crushed by debris. When the monster was about to attack again, Sakurama finally realizes that what his parents said was a mistake. On the other side, Sakurama suddenly remembers the words of the Red Ranger and now seems to be setting up stakes to protect his older sister. After that, he manages to survive the incident, and from that incident, Sakurama admits that he eventually chose to join the Ranger force to fight the monsters. However, Sakurama also realizes that there is no longer any hope there, as the Rangers are full of lies. Returning to the present, after telling his story, Sakurama asks for D's real name because he knows that D only used a fake name during the exam. Initially, D didn't want to reveal his real name, but with some coaxing, Sakurama finally found out that the monster in front of him is called Fighter D. Not long after, they both realize that Hekaru is walking towards them. After that, Sakurama is seen approaching Hekaru while introducing himself. At that moment, Sakurama admits to having just caught an injured fighter, and he will escort Hekaru to meet the fighter. At the same time, Fighter D understands that Sakurama is trying to save him, where Sakurama seems to be walking in circles as if stalling for time. After walking quite far, Hikaru finally grows angry, threatens Sakurama with his weapon and asks him not to choose the wrong path. Unexpectedly, Fighter D suddenly appears in front of them both, and after hearing D's words that he had just escaped captivity, Sakurama realizes that D is also trying to save him. At that moment, D managed to attack Hikaru after deceiving him. Hikaru, angered, finally drew his sacred artifact weapon. Even though his sacred artifact was only a replica, he believed that the weapon could destroy monsters like D. After D fled into the woods, Hikaru was seen making remote slashes, but none of his attacks hit D. Frustrated that none of his attacks hit D, Hikaru finally slashed down all the trees nearby. But D managed to seize the weapon after transforming into a tree. However, when D was about to use the weapon, his hand suddenly blistered. This happened after Hikaru borrowed power from Blue, and he believed that with the strength of the bonds of his other teammates, it could make him very strong. After that, D is seen fleeing into the woods from Hikaru's pursuit, and during his escape, D finally meets Sakurama again, and there they devise a strategy. Shortly after, D is seen holding Sakurama near a steep drop, where Sakurama requests Hikaru to hand over his fake sacred object, warning that failure to comply will result in immediate elimination. Initially hesitant, Hikaru considers eliminating them both simultaneously. However, Sakurama appears to anticipate this plan. He then reveals that he has called for backup from headquarters, who will arrive to assist shortly. Upon hearing this, Sakurama realizes that if the other Rangers discover that Hikaru sacrificed a teammate to defeat an opponent, it could pose a serious threat. Reluctantly, Hikaru agrees to Sakurama's request. But when D moves to seize the weapon, Hikaru unexpectedly throws acid at D's face and swiftly retrieves his weapon. Despite his surprise, Sakurama manages to grab the weapon and strikes D. As D falls into the ravine after being slashed, Sakurama expresses regret to Hikaru, feeling he acted rashly with the weapon. Sakurama explains that he succeeded because Hikaru had shared his strength, which he believes is a form of strong connection. Hikaru is deeply touched by this revelation and appears to place his trust in those words. However, it is revealed that the person who fell into the ravine was actually Sakurama, now missing his right hand. Meanwhile, the individual who accompanies Hikaru back to headquarters appears to be D. Returning to the scene where D and Sakurama discuss their strategy, Sakurama shocks D by cutting off his own right hand. He explains that compared to D's 12 years of suffering, his injury is minor. It's revealed that all the recent plans were Sakurama's own doing. He urges D to live as himself, and hopes he'll find an answer he's searching for. Though hesitant at first, D eventually agrees, wagering that he'll defeat the Sentai force first. However, Sakurama subtly disagrees, believing they should first fix the Sentai. Moral lesson from the story: always check your pockets before declaring war, especially if you're bringing dynamite to a disguised party. And remember, when in doubt, just swap your left arm for a holy artifact. It's the ultimate power move.